All right, what's going on, Locker Room Sports fans from around the world? We appreciate y'all for coming by and hanging out with me today. Guys, I got a special report. It's going to be interesting. We're going to go back in time, and we're going to talk about the last game. So, what was really the last college football game that we all want to maybe think about, or some of our favorite teams? But I'm really wanting to get down into the nitty-gritty of the fact that at one point in history, there was a time when college football changed. And as in all of us being fans of the game, and obviously you've come by here and you're already subscribed to the channel, or maybe you stumbled by here just to click on the video to find out, what is this guy talking about? Well, I'm going to tell you. We need to take a little trip back in time, okay? We got to go back a little ways, not too far. First off, I'm going to start out with January the 7th of 2013. Ohio State, in their 2012 season, they finished as the only undefeated team from a Power 5 during that time, but they were under sanctions. And you remember why, they had got in trouble before for Terrell Pryor and the guys for trading jewelry for tattoos, which now in today's time of being 11 years later, seems very minuscule. I mean, it just seems like that wouldn't even matter at all, because now it's legal to pay players for their NIL, from their name, image, and likeness. Now, a few things changed. So we're going to talk about a few rule changes and why was it the last game? What do you mean? So how did that come about? What are you thinking? Well, these rule changes, such as the kickoff was moved up to the 35 and touchback would start coming out to the 25-yard line. Also during this time, if you think back a little bit, Notre Dame was added to the ACC, and Louisville had beat Florida in the Sugar Bowl 33-23. And Alabama plays Notre Dame. Also, we'll back up and talk about during that time, as that season had ended, of January of 13, and then we're going to start the season of 2013 of August, September time. Well, in 2013, in December, Auburn prepares to play Florida State at the Rose Bowl. Now, this was the first title game with these new targeting rules that we'd seen. They had been in effect since 2008. I'm pretty sure is how it read out. But they weren't going to start throwing players out. So those things had to be taken into consideration of seeing how coaches are going to lose some of their better players because they're going to get thrown out of the game. Now, this was that first title game under these new rules of not like just targeting, like I said, but they're going to start throwing kids out. Now, Jameson Winston had won the Heisman. Still doing a little flashback here to get some concept of what we're talking about, because I want to set this up for you to remember back and seeing all these old games and how they had played out, and just kind of refresh the memory to get you in that time frame. A.J. McCarron had won the Maxwell Award. Odell Beckham, OBJ, won the MVP. Gus Malzahn was the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year. What about that? Now, in the 2011 season, so we're going to move back again a little bit, it was going to be an unsportsmanlike conduct to have anybody to pull a touchdown off the board if before you scored the touchdown, you catch the ball, you run down the field, and before you get in the end zone, you remember some guys pointing or doing this or pointing up to the sky, that would become an unsportsmanlike. But now they're going to take the touchdown off the board. These are some rules that started playing into effect. This is the year before. Now, also be a 15-yard penalty from where they were. Now, because of the play that I think it's A.J. Green when they played LSU, he catches the ball, and it winds up being an unsportsmanlike, which sets this up. It just totally changed the game for LSU. Your pants won't have to cover your knee anymore. Those were some rules added in this time. Ohio State players, we talked about that a while ago. This is when they was found out for trading jewelry for tattoos. I think it's their stuff. Who cares what they do with it? Also, remember North Carolina Tar Heels? They fired Butch Jones because they had to cancel their season they had to forfeit the seasons, had to vacate their wins for 08 and 09 season. Also, Shapiro was the big talk down there at Miami. He was blowing lots of money on the kids down there, which is still same stuff's going on. And a very touchy topic. This is when the Sandusky case and things were going on at Penn State. LSU beats Bama, and probably they called the game of the century. A defensive battle to the end. 9-6 in overtime. LSU takes down Alabama. Week 10, Iowa State beats Okie State 37-31 with 2 overtimes. I remember hearing that news and thinking, how does this happen? Also, Trent Richardson was a offensive player of the year, and Honey Badger was the defensive player of the year. Now, LSU wins the SEC at the end of this season here, and they beat Georgia 42-10. They were the only undefeated team in the land at this time, okay? Also, in some of the bowl games then, I've just kind of seen this, and this made me think about, Georgia beating TCU and the crazy high score that it wound up turning out to be. And they made a real big deal about how much Georgia scored on them. Well, Clemson beat West Virginia 70-33. And I don't remember anybody saying anything about it, So continuing back in time here, then we're going to get to our main point. Now, we can all go here and think about during this time, okay? And as we talked about, the game of the century, 9-6 in overtime, Alabama, LSU, the field goal game. Everybody remembers this. Now, the number one defense in the land faces the number one offense in the land. Alabama was on average of 190 yards given up a game, and points scored for LSU. They were averaging 38 points a game. McCarron versus Jefferson, Hightower versus defensive end Sam Montgomery, Kirkpatrick and Barron versus Honey Badger, and Eric Reed there at LSU. So here it is. The last game that we really had for college football it's this game. It was the defensive battle of the year. It was a game that was not really supposed to even happen because of how everything laid out weirdly. Remember we mentioned the Iowa State game. They lose that, knocks them out of spot, and LSU's undefeated, and the only team that even played them close was Alabama. So the committee feels like that's going to put the most butts in the seats, and that's probably the game that's going to make them the most money. And I do remember Les Miles when they brought up the Jumbotron there at ESPN and them to say, and your opponent for this year's, title game, something will be Alabama. And I remember him mumbling. He mumbled the word he knew he didn't want to play them again. No team wants to play a team twice. If you beat them the first time, and Saban was just nearly impossible to beat twice in a row. So for me, this is the last game. The game turns out to be a game of a lifetime. And it's not for everybody. And this is what changed it. It brought in the idea that they had such terrible TV ratings. They knew the NCAA and making these TV deals, SEC makes these deals, and these bowl games are done through ESPN and ABC. And when the ratings are not good, that's not what you want. The idea of the game for them is to make money. Now, people were already sick of Alabama, okay? Bama had won it, and they had just beat, Texas just a few years before that. Auburn had played Florida State and lost. So, you can tell already from how things are laying out. Now LSU's won it. They've just beat Georgia, and they're going to play for it. The SEC is taking over college football. And from then on, these next few years out, everybody kind of knows what happened. On and off, it was Alabama, Ohio State, or Alabama and Clemson, and it just kind of bounced around back and forth. Ohio State plays and wins one later. Clemson does wind up winning one. And it just become what it is today. But this game here, they just lost money. And these players that I mentioned, Honey Badger's defensive player of the year, Trent Richardson's offensive player of the year, So we know where all the good guys are. So don't you want to see the best two teams play? I was excited about the game for rematch-wise because I know I'm an old school guy. But a lot of guys that are going to be involved in this later that are at a young age and this time in the TV productions of ESPN and whatnot, they want to see teams score a lot of points. And this being the last game, I'm going to talk about this and let's go through these notes on it. It proves it. It just proves it. And there's only one other game in history that's even close to this, and we'll bring that up too. Hey, if you like this kind of stuff, this is just like a doc series special that I want to do because we were off this week. And I'm just going to put this out here on the old YouTube and just for fun, something to talk about. And this is an opinion based on how I felt about the season, how it had went, and where college football has landed now and how it's played now and how the game is completely different. Players are different. You can't even play the game the same way no more. This target and roll and throwing kids out, it just give them more advantage to the offense. And then these back shoulder throws started coming in more and more. Clemson brought that in more and more, and Watkins and all those guys, and they were great. But the game changed, and this was the last one. Bama LSU was the only title game shutout. There's never – I look back through some, I don't know, back to 2000 or so. The only one that comes close was the 0-1 Orange Bowl, Oklahoma and Florida State. It was 6-2 going into the fourth quarter. Oklahoma scored a touchdown. Heupel threw a pick, but the OU defense stopped Florida State. Later, Oklahoma running back Quentin Griffin ran a touchdown with 7 minutes and 40 left in the game. 55 seconds to go now left in the game. A punt gets high on a snap. Ferguson ran it out of the back of the end zone for Florida State's only points. Have a safety. So Florida State and Oklahoma in a 13-2 game is the only – and that's just a regular – we're talking about bowl games, and there's not been there's been other a bowl game shutout, but like national championship game to completely shut a team out. They scored no points, none. And they only scored 3 field goals, the last time they played. So here's how this game starts off. And as I started going through this and talking about it with myself and looking at some highlights of the game, starting to write it down, it started to come back a little bit. You remember how this game was so slow. It's just not for everybody. And it's why it's the last game, because there's no other kind of like it of itself. The opening play, LSU fumbles the ball. They later have to punt to Bama. They had no first downs. Alabama had 4 shots at field goal kicker Shelley. He made 3 of them, making it 9-0 at halftime. Now, in the second half, LSU offense crossed the 50 one time. The late 34-yard run by Trent for the game's only touchdown was kind of, the coup de grace there for the game. And you can go back and watch the game, and you can type it in on YouTube there and watch highlights from it. And it's just an assortment of 2 teams, just highly skilled tacklers. And this was the misses, the field goals, okay? 23, 34, 41, 35, 44-yard field goals. That's what happened in this game, okay? And then he misses the PAT after Trent scores the touchdown. Now check this out. Bama had 21 first downs. LSU had 5. Bama had 150 rushing. LSU had 39. 234 passing for Alabama. 53 passing for LSU. 35 minutes Bama controls the ball for LSU's 24. 35 times rushing the ball for Bama and 27 times for LSU rushing the ball. And passes, McCarron throws 34 and Jefferson throws 17. So we just have to say Sugar Bowl 2012 was the last real game. It just was. Before, defense was set back from all the rules as a new game would take off, as the offense would be celebrated. To keep fans more interested in the game because of this game being 21-0, they knew that college football couldn't be played that way anymore. Things had to change. Now, already having the targeting rule itself, yes, it's 08. But they're going to start throwing kids out. And you just couldn't take the risk of losing a player. Also, things to go into effect is how Oregon and Coach Kelly up there, Chip, had changed. For Oregon was running 70 or 80 plays. It's just the idea to go fast and just try to catch the defense off guard. And as those things prevailed, and Coach Saban had come out and said things like, it's going to lead to more injury. You're going to see more kids hurt because they're not rotating players, which was true. It turned out to be true. So you couldn't recruit the same way. So then with Coach Chisnick coming to Auburn and bringing Gus in, and they were running this way. And they were running, 60, 70, 80 plays. And then Cam comes in. They get him from JUCO college. And, this just right, during this year before there when they played Florida State, it's just such an idea that offensive play calling could just outwit defense. But here's the problem, and kind of a closing note for me on this. This ain't going to be a real long video. You had to be of the offensive mind understanding to know that if you just go fast and just catch a defender out of position one time, if a guy's sneaking down and looking at the end to try to read the RPO, and you can read that, you pull the ball, make a quick throw over the top, it don't even have to be good football. So what it's become is it was just gimmicky and tricky. It was basically a fancied up high school offense that brought to the league that it could just go fast and it didn't have to be quality, because all it was doing was creating a place on the field where you just throw the ball where somebody's not, which, ain't that the name of the game? That's what you're supposed to do. Your quarterback can make those plays. But it seemed like to me, these are just my opinions. You can say I'm crazy and comment below. That's fine. Nobody's opinions are wrong. Does it take skill to throw a 5-yard quick? I don't know. It seems like it's take more skill to throw the ball, 10, 20 yards up the field and try to hit a guy running, to go catch the ball instead of just reading something across the middle and coming out a quick throw, off the top of your head here. And when they quit lining up, and, LSU would run that quick pitch play, where they'd line up in the eye and it'd just be a quick pitch right over to the back. Then it just changed to, you just had the opportunity to just spread guys out across the field. And, I don't want to say Oregon started it. Like, we all know the air raid started at Kentucky with Coach Mummy and Coach Leach. But I can't, and tell me what you think too. I can't remember a team that started playing faster than Oregon did. He just figured out a way that worked for them out there because the defense was not real good at Oregon and the Pac-12. They wasn't great. And then they're known for that. But if we can go fast, I can just catch people out of place. And what it does, that hurry up, it kind of cripples the defense to where you can't sub a guy in or out. And I think this game, LSU-Alabama game, the 21-0 title game, I think it's just the last time that you players get subbed. I'm not saying like players don't get subbed anymore, but there was, this timing to the game to where you could just see the guys going from horses to cars. Does that make sense? And that's just kind of how I feel about it. So the last college football game to me was definitely this 2011 season. It just changed how everything was done. Now, is it for the better? I don't know. We could go back and we could talk about that too. It's January 2012 is when the game's actually played. So did it make it better, by going fast and now everybody goes fast? And now trying to recruit high school players, you have to get the players that play that style, right? To be, some kind of recollection of where we were as when the game started. Because they didn't even they didn't throw the ball at all, right? So the whole idea of things changing and how things go over time and how you recruit players. Okay, so where are you going to find these players at from high schools, that can run this hurry up style of offense and don't run, like a double set or, maybe wing tees or I formations or I don't know. I don't think any high schools back then run like the box or nothing like that. Maybe some real small schools did around some places, but so coming in and finding players that could play that style of football out of high school to fill those positions, that's the thing. I mean, that exists. So if you take kids from high schools now, which all the schools play, spread out and run, then, it's not quite as hard to find those kids to play those positions. So I could imagine what it was like. I'll compare it to this and we'll close. Maybe the first pass, back in the day, like Newt Rockney and the guys from Notre Dame, they jumped when they would throw the ball, jump pass. I imagine a lot of old guys that was watching the game back then thought, well, that's just crazy. Why would you throw the ball down the field? Why would you take a chance to turn the ball over? Because when it's in the air, it's anybody's ball. Anybody could take it. So maybe I'm the old man on the porch saying, that's terrible. This is when football changed. And my God, in my day when you played, this is how it was done, and this is how you play football. And now you just spread it out and throw it all over the place. If I sound like that guy, I don't mean to be that guy, but it is different. And I just, nobody can change my opinion on it. You can have your own idea of your own game, the last game, but it has to be this game. I mean, what other shutout in a national championship game have you had? And all these rules and how things had changed leading up to it. This was the last title game starting that year before they started throwing kids out. That's the biggest difference. And you all know, coaches, if you've coached any at all or been around the level of high school or college or small college, the coaches had to sit down and have a discussion. So at the beginning of that year, when Auburn goes that 2013, that was the first title game through that year that they played. They were throwing a lot of kids out. And I had the name of the first kid. He played at Tulane. Player at Tulane was the first player. Tony somebody was the first player actually threw out of a football game. Being thrown out of games that's definitely something that had to come across the desk as coaches when they all sat down and had a meeting that year, because they got a list of all these rule changes, and I went through some of them. They're saying, it just changed how you could play defense. And so how you're practicing with your guys, they couldn't just run in there and Reuben Foster back this time, later, he would just fly in there with his head down, man. And I know they're doing it for player safety because, nobody wants to have lifelong injuries, and everybody just wants to play the game and make a living and have a family. And I understand all that, but you have to consider some things and you can tell when it's intentional. And this targeting thing throwing kids out is terrible. That, to me, that's just a terrible idea, because now they are learned and taught more. They have learned more over the years. But imagine being, these teams here, this 2013 year, you've practiced a certain way of football your whole life through junior high and high school, and you get to college and say you're a senior, and you've just been knocking people's faces off. And now, you can't have your head down. You want your head to be up. Well, if you're running somebody with your head up and your neck's back, then you're just going to, push your neck back even worse. You're taking an ideal injury to have your neck pushed backwards. And I know you don't want it jammed, and you want to see what you tackle, and you have to tuck your neck. So, tucking the neck and keeping your head up where you can see the ball, it's just not something that all the kids were taught. Now, on a young level, when I had the boys around this area, I taught them that, because that's what we had to do. And we didn't want them to just fly in there with their head down and get hurt. We want them to see, especially at a young age, you want them to see what they're tackling. because they're not just really experienced at that young age to be in coordination with their hands and feet. And as they're going to, break down the tackle, they're going to have their hands back and those kind of things. So you couldn't just fly all over the field willy-nilly and throw heads into people anymore and try to break up these passes, especially these little short crossing route passes, because they had already seen how this was going to go. And they're running these RPOs and they're throwing the ball out quick, and guys are getting hit across the middle and they're lighting them up. We had to change it. They're going to say for safety, but it opened up the offensive guys. So now when you had guys like Lane Kiffin, where he was back in 2011, 12, 13, well, we know he'd been at Tennessee a few years before that. He'd been at USC during this time. He's probably loving it because he's an offensive guy. Or like Steve Sarkisian, wherever he was in those years. Now, Nick Saban being a defensive guy, he's probably not real fired up about it, but it gives them an opportunity to be able to throw the ball down the field, and these pass interference calls are just nearly impossible to beat. I mean, there's no way to defend that back shoulder throw, and when a guy's up the sideline, he turns the ball, and Saban, I've heard him talk about it, and other coaches, you can't run through the player to get to the ball, because if you do, it's going to be a PI. So January 9th, 2012, the last college football game, it just was. It changed from then on out and that year forward of how offensive could play, how teams have always been able to score a lot. And it just forced coaches to have a conversation about how we're going to play this game, and what are we going to do from here on out. And it's just never been the same. And you could tell most people didn't like it. They didn't like this 21-0 game. Now the two best teams probably played, and Oklahoma had their shot to play that and get in there, man. But they lost to Iowa State. Oof. Boy, man, they messed up. That it could have been special, and it just it didn't turn out that way for them. And that's just not how it wound up. So we'll cut it off here. And I hope you enjoyed some of this. And if you do, hey, subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate it. We're rocking over 500. Thank all you guys and gals for subscribing to the channel. And if you like podcast stuff and you can't watch on YouTube or whatever all the time, you can just type in Locker Room Sports Talk on Applecast, iHeartRadio, Spotify. We're on all those places too. And we're on every Sunday night. And we had our breaks our last week. This week, we're going to be doing Alabama and Georgia. I'm going to talk about them. And I got another topic too about some NIL things and how do fans, what do they have to do with NIL? How does that, if you're interested, come back Sunday night at 6, and I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about Alabama, and we're going to go through a little bit of their receiver room, and you kind of know most of their players. And Dean's going to talk about Georgia, probably go through their receiver room and some of their D-backs. I'll bring up the defensive back room probably at Bama too, and we'll talk about where we think they may land and, where they're going to be at. Well, they're going to be the team playing for the SEC title again. I mean, it's just seemed like it's been the Bama and Georgia show for years now. So come back Sunday night and hang out. And whatever you think about this video, that's fine. But for me, the last game, January 9th, 2012, it just was 21-0. It changed football forever. The rules were all changed, and things were just different from then on. It just was never geared towards defense really anymore. So that's my 2 bits on it. I appreciate you for coming by and hanging out, and we'll see you Sunday night, 6 o'clock, Locker Room Sports. Thank you.